Good morning. So I'm going to give you the key to the mystery to unlocking the story of the Gospels. This is the most complicated story, and I see people just going over and over this debate with Muslims and atheists and Christians, and people are just like trying to wrap their heads around what this story is in Christianity in the four Gospels. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, and it's nothing that I've covered before really in detail. It has nothing to do with astrotheology, and it's something that leads into a completely different direction, but it explains the entire makeup and content and story behind the story of Jesus Christ in the four Gospels. So there's a key word, which is logos, and if you understand what that word means, then you understand why they wrote the story, and you know who wrote the story. But what you see with the debating going on is you have Muslims who are saying the story makes no sense, and so they've invented a fake Jesus or a new Jesus that's just a Muslim prophet, right? Because the story was absolutely incomprehensible to these people. They're like, this does not make sense. To some degree, I understand that. It doesn't make sense if you don't understand what is being talked about. Christians just took everything literally and said, I'm not questioning it, I'm just believing. And so they've maintained the story throughout time without really knowing what it was about. And then you have the atheists that just rejected it entirely and said this is gibberish. You have the Talmudists who said that Jesus, much like the Muslims, that he was a real person and that he had to be rejected. So anyway, all those explanations are incorrect, and it has now there is astrotheological symbolism with Christianity, just as there was with the Old Testament, which is why it's perpetuated in Christianity, because it's a perpetuation of Old Testament astrotheology. Jesus and the 12, the Israelites, God and the 12, which is the Israelites, God and the 12 Israelite tribes, right? So then you have Jesus and the 12 disciples. It's a continuation of that astrotheological symbolism. But it's not really a story of astrotheology other than that symbolism is being used. So what is it? Well, the key word is logos. And this is the key that opens up the entire story. And if you understand what this word means, the entire story makes sense. And the people who wrote it have explained what they meant by it, except that these books have been lost, or let's say not lost. These books exist, but are hidden from the public, and they've been hidden from the public to a large extent since the Roman Catholic Church took over the world. After Constantine declared himself to be a Christian. All those books were basically taken and probably hidden in the Vatican so that nobody could read them and understand what was being talked about, so that they could sell their version of Christianity, which they wanted to use as a method of conquest. The original version of Christianity is actually quite enlightening, and it's actually quite liberating, if you know what this word means. Now, I'm going to tell you how this happened. I've told you a little bit before about Philo. Philo was a Greek Jew philosopher who sought to harmonize the teachings in the Torah, which he saw them as allegorical. So he said that these are stories, these are fictional accounts, but there was also a real history of the Israelites and the Judeans. But then there's also the fictional accounts of their history. So there's like the fictional accounts are their history, but they also had a real history that kind of paralleled that. So that's what Philo was suggesting, and he sought to harmonize what was coming out of the Greek philosophy with what was believed in the Judean Israelite philosophy. So what he did was he wrote many books on this subject, and that these books were taken by the Catholic Church and put in a cave somewhere. And instead they gave you just the four Gospels and the writings of Paul. So now, when you read John 1 and you see this, I'm not going to read it exactly. Or, let's see. I think I have it open here. Let's just read. Let's read the passage of John 1, which says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This one was in the beginning with God. Okay. In the Greek, we have a Greek translation, and of course, the word "word" is actually originally logos. And that's not just a coincidence that it's that the word logos is being used. This is the key that unlocks the entire story. And if you ever wanted Christianity to be totally pure, totally purified, then you would have everyone understand exactly what this word means and where it came from and why it was used in this context. So I'm going to read you I'm going to read you first what Philo says that the word means. So here we have Philo's. Let's read just a little bit about this. Philo's view of God. Philo 30 BCE to 50 BCE. So he's 30 BC. Oh, I'm sorry. 30 before Christ existed to around 50 AD. Was a leading writer of the Hellenistic Jewish community in Alexandria, Egypt. He wrote expansively in Greek on the intersection of philosophy, politics, and religion. He explored the connection between Platonic philosophy and late Second Temple Judaism. For example, he maintained that the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible and Jewish law are a blueprint for the pursuit of individual enlightenment. Philo interpreted the stories of the 5 books of Moses as metaphors and symbols. He did not reject the subjective experiences of the ancient Judeans, but he explained that the 5 books of Moses cannot be understood as concrete objective history. Philo was largely shaped by contemporary Greek philosophy. For example, he explained that the ideal Greek forms of reason and wisdom illustrated the deep mystical truth of the God of Judaism. Okay, so he's saying that reason and wisdom explains the God of the Israelites. Okay, now I'm going to go on to tell you what his version of this word logos means. He said Philos used the term logos to mean an intermediary divine being between God and the physical universe. Okay? So Philo followed the Platonic distinction between imperfect matter. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. It's too complicated. I'll give it to you the simple explanation. Logos was the highest of these intermediary beings and was called by Philo the firstborn of God. That's the key to it right there. Now, what is this? What is the logos? It's an idea. Okay, I'm gonna give you a very simple explanation. Some people get way too complicated on what this word means. What it is God, according to Philo, is viewed, and others in Greek philosophy, is viewed as something totally outside the physical universe and not part of it. So it doesn't have any form. It's a formless entity. It's a thinking being without form. It has none of the qualities of the physical world. It's not matter. It's not energy. It's not space. It's not time. But this creator entity forms a thought, which is the governing principle of the universe. This is the logos. This is what maintains the world, is this idea. And this is the logos. So the logos is the governing principle of the universe. The governing principle of the universe is the easiest way to understand it. This would be the firstborn of God, according to Philo and Greek philosophy. So the firstborn of God is this idea which creates and sustains the universe. It's the governing principle of the entire world, is this idea. This is the logos. This is what they're talking about when they say that in John chapter 1, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Well, so God, this creator entity, creates this idea, which is the governing principle of the universe. And so that is the ruling principle of the universe. So God is considered a ruler, and so this is the ruling principle of the universe. It's an idea. It's the idea which is the ruling principle of the universe. This is the logos. And so here we have a whole story built around this idea of the logos, right? And it says anyway, and then it continues on in John 1 to talk about that all things through him did happen, and without him not even one thing that hath happened. Right, because it's the governing principle of the universe. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Now it's anthropomorphized. It's become like a man, right? So instead of just being the principle, it's now become in the story the man Jesus, and and the story continues on from there. Let's just read a little bit more. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light in the darkness did shine, and the darkness did not perceive it. There came a man, having been sent from God, whose name is John. This one came for testimony, that he might testify about the light, that all might believe through him. So he saw the light, he saw the wisdom, and anyway, so John is testifying to this light that he saw. Okay? And this light has been made into a man, a story about a man named Jesus, and of course it's going to, now that he's associated with the light, now it's going to follow a sun life cycle of being born on the winter solstice and of dying and resurrecting on the Passover, which is originally the New Year holiday of the Middle East. Everything was around the Passover. So you have the Creator God, the governing principle of the universe, which is then made into a story of a man, who then is made into the story of the Son, which is born and dies and is resurrected and teaches everyone and does miracles, right? And then is, of course, killed by the Pharisees because that was the argument they were having at the time. Okay, so who came up with this word logos? This word logos comes from, this is where I find it, okay, I find it here in the Western world in the New Testament, okay, in the Gospel, actually, in the Gospel of John. And then, so who put it in there? Philo put it in there. Philo put it in there, and you have to understand that I just read you that Philo was a philosopher out of Alexandria, Egypt. Well, his family wasn't just any family. His family ran the tax collecting business for the Roman government. So he was he's part of a very wealthy family that's totally involved in Roman government. But he's also a philosopher, and they're all studying Greek philosophy. They were enamored with Greek philosophy. So his ideas are being circulated, and they're very popular. And through this evolution comes the story of Jesus. And so Jesus is the Logos, and he's worshipped as the firstborn of God. The governing principle of the universe is the firstborn of God, which is worshipped as the light, which is symbolized as the sun. And there you go. So we're going to trace it back. We trace it back through Philo, who of course got the word originally, came down through a lot of other philosophers used the term, but originally it was this guy, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. It's Heraclitus. And Heraclitus was the one who invented the word, and really when he invented it, a lot of people didn't understand it at first, but I'm just going to tell you, it's very simple. Heraclitus, quite frankly, was kind of a weird philosopher, and he kind of made things too confusing for people, and he spoke in riddles, and he was kind of a jerk, actually. And he was considered the dark philosopher because he wasn't really enlightening. He was mostly just kind of just thought he was smarter than everybody else, and everyone else was dumb. And so he would just say things and like put him in complex riddles to make fun of you because you don't understand what he's talking about. But he did come up with this term, which explained as the governing principle of the world, which he viewed as being in a constant state of change and conflict, and that this was the logos was the governing principle that maintained this chaotic order of the universe, which he says was always in conflict and chaos. But there was a principle behind it which was governing that chaos of the world in the state of constant change and clashing, and that's how he viewed things. But there was a governing principle behind it, which he called the logos, and so that logos is the governing principle of the universe. He's the one that invented the term, and then other philosophers said, of course, there's a governing principle of the universe, and they also went on to use the word logos. So we find that word being used throughout Greek philosophy up until the time of Philo. So now Heraclitus, let's look at when he lived, okay? So we're talking Heraclitus is when? He died 475 BC. So we're talking 500 BC he lived. So 500 BC. This is almost 500 years before Philo. Okay, is how 500 BC is also around the time of when was the Assyrian conquest? Was that 7? Was that 700, or is that, what time was that? 700 BC. Okay, so this was after the Assyrians attacked Israel. Okay, so, and then I think when the Persians, then the Babylonians. Okay, I think it was during the Persian conquest of was that around the same time? Yeah, it would have been around the same time as the Persian rule of the Middle East. The Greeks were still kind of contained back there in the region of Macedonia and the islands, and along the coast of Canaan and Africa. But so that would have been around the same time. So we're looking 500 BC. This word is coined, which is the logos, which is the governing principle of the universe. And this is a popular term among Greek philosophers, which is carried through until the time of Philo, around the turn of the century, but literally the time where we're told Christ lived, and he writes these stories, or he writes this philosophy, and people come to use this term and worship the only begotten, the begotten of the Creator, which is the Logos, which is the governing principle of the entire universe. So it literally is God, and they're calling it Jesus. They're calling it they're worshiping it as the God. Well, of course, it would be the God of the creation story of Genesis. So it is the same thing, and so it's just the same thing. And so it becomes a story, and then it it's given a life cycle as a man through the sun symbolism, and it's worshipped on the Passover, right? The resurrection of nature. So it all fits right together. And so that's what the word means. So now, how is this really, all this information lost? Well, the first way it was lost is that when it was translated from Greek, I don't know if it was maintained in the Latin. Could have been maintained in the Latin because the Catholic Church uses the term logos, but they don't tell you where it came from, and they hid the books which would have explained it. And then once it's translated into German, I don't know I've never read a German, the Martin Luther German translation, but once it's translated in English, it's just the word. The word, the word, the word. Christ is the word. But you don't know it's the logos, which has a very specific meaning in Greek philosophy. But now you do know. So now you know what they're talking about, and it's no longer a mystery to you, and there's nothing mysterious about it. And that is the truest, purest Christianity. So what should really happen in order to clear all this up for people is that the books of Philo, which are hidden somewhere, and kind of like the only way you can really access them is you'll have some university, which somebody, some professor will read it and then tell you what it says. That's the way they do this. What should really happen is that copies of Philo's works and all the other original works of the Greek philosophers in their original writings, not someone's translation, not someone else's opinion about what it says, but all the original documents need to be published for the Western world to read, so that we'll see exactly what Philo, I would say starting with Philo, and then going back through the other philosophers, right back to the original philosopher Pythagoras, who kind of started this whole line of thinking. And everything that is available in the original writings need to be published in their original form, and people will have to, you can write a translation, or people can learn what those symbols mean in Greek and read them for themselves to see what was actually written. But the way that it's done now is if you can even get these ideas, they're filtered through a professor at a university who will tell you he read it and this is what it says. And I'm sure they're being accurate if they're trying to teach people that are at the university, but there's really no substitute for having that information. And of course, this appears to have been lost around the time that the Catholic, not lost, but hidden. This is all hidden around the time that the Catholic Church took over the religion of Christianity. So in order to clear up the religion, that's the thing that will do it. That is the key to clearing it all up, so it's actually in a pure state. And then from there, to purify the Old Testament, you would need to get the original Babylonian records and Sumerian records and the Egyptian records. And so then you would have all the original records of the Old Testament. And that would give people a full understanding of what they're reading and how it came about. So that's the end of this video, and I'm hoping that this will help people to be able to restore civilization and society.